All right, you guys were asking for more agricultural stuff. Look at the bird mouse nest in the aspirator. Oh my goodness. We're actually gonna be doing some videos with Kevin. You might remember Kevin from such videos like I blew up the 8.3 on my combine. Way down, it's all good. The rod was on its way down, so we think it's okay. Here we go. All right, so Kevin actually lives just down the road from me, but you've been around Case quite a bit.
Yeah, I own all Case tractors. I worked for Case dealership for 13 years before I dove into farming. When these MX tractors were new, we sold a pile of them. They were a real hit. I'm sure there's lots of them around the countryside. And I've had just about every aspect of them tore apart.
The point of these videos is just kind of go over the equipment. They've got little quirks and little things that if it lets you down, there's some few things to check before you bring it to a dealer or pay for a service call. And some things that if you are interested in buying one of these tractors or whatever else we're gonna be looking at, that you know what to look for before you get into it.
Lots of things can go wrong with them, but we're just gonna go over some of the ones that are real easy to fix, because those will be here all day.
All right, so it's got a few little quirks, but it is like a really good tractor, right?
Yeah, this is my favorite tractor. I love driving this thing. It is handy in the field. It's comfortable to drive. It's got power, simple enough,
but luxurious enough that you're not
tired after 6 hours.
Now don't get us wrong, we're gonna go over some quirks. Some of this is gonna get a little bit more technical, which is really interesting if you have one of these tractors, because this video is designed to save you a pile of money. What we're not saying is that this thing is a pile of garbage, it's just that every tractor, every piece of equipment, everything, no matter whether it's old or new, is going to give you some problems. So we're just gonna go over some of the things, especially Kevin with all of his experience, one, fixing them, and two, driving them, of what to look for and what to go over to try and save you guys some money. It is technical, but for anybody that's thinking about getting into mechanics, if you're a younger guy, this is the kind of stuff that you'll be getting into if you're working at a dealership, and you gotta really enjoy it. There's the diagnosing part of it as to, okay, why is it not working? Do we tear into it, or is there a few things we should check first to be able to make that process a little easier? So let's get into it.
All right, so this is a Case IH MX110. It's in a series of, they went MX100 to 135. They're all roughly the same with different horsepowers. They all, under the hood, have a good old 5.9 Cummins, which I think Rich will appreciate.
And it's a P-pump.
Yeah, the older Maxxums had the rotary pumps. When they went to the MX series, they went to an inline pump. It's got a 4x4 transmission. Some of them have a complete standard transmission, but the majority of them have a 4-speed power shift in them. And 2-speed PTO at the back. We'll talk about that later, because there were some issues with that. And front ends were Carrera front ends.
They make good front ends.
Yeah, so sometimes you can source parts a little cheaper.
It's always good to price check, right? We found that.
Yep.
Cummins is sometimes cheaper than Case. Case is
Sometimes
cheaper than Cummins.
Yeah. These tractors in the front ends, they have a limited slip clutch, so that it always is trying to drive both tires. In the owner's manual, when they tell you to change the oil, they tell you to put in good old 85 140 Case oil, and that's it. So when you take your oil out, you put that in, 2 months later, that thing will be making a pile of racket, and you'll swear that the front end is toast. But chances are, all you need is a bottle of limited slip additive. So when you change the oil, put one of those in. Otherwise, it makes enough. I've seen it. We had one tractor, we tore it apart because we thought the front end was shot, it was under warranty, and we could find nothing wrong. If it's making noise when you go around the corner, try that first. I'm not a big fan of mechanics in the can, but this one actually works.
So this cost somebody like 4,000 bucks? Something like that for you to tear it apart and put it back together again? Somewhere around there. 4,000 bucks at a bottom.
All right, so on the engine, not a whole lot goes wrong other than the old KDP can sometimes let loose. But other than that, it's pretty solid. The only issue is this breather here, this crankcase breather, the tube comes down and gets into the frame. So you wanna have it hanging down here like this. Sometimes it gets stuck up onto the frame because people move it out of their way when they're doing something, and it lays on the frame here and it gets plugged up with junk, and that is bad. Normally, it'll blow this seal out around this cover here, and it'll leak oil all over the place because that tube plugs up. But this fall, I had one that threw me for a little bit of a loop, and what it did was that actually held on, and it was pouring oil out the exhaust. So our theory there was that with all the extra pressure in the crankcase, the turbo couldn't drain off and the oil went into the exhaust because we unplugged that tube and problem was solved.
So what happened was the oil would get blown out the exhaust and come right up out of the exhaust pipe and just pour down the exhaust.
Running down the exhaust.
Yeah, so because that crankcase breather is plugged, this pipe actually gets pressurized. The oil can't drain out of the turbo and blows past the seal.
Check the turbo and it still looked good, and then, oh, wait a minute. Check that tube and sure enough, it was plugged.
Another thing that throws you for a loop, and I've done it, is you'd swear that the oil pan gasket's leaking because it's running oil out the back, and that's that rear main seal housing. It's got these tiny little bolts that go around. So when you replace the rear main seal, make sure that those little bolts are tight, and that's the same on the truck engines as well. For some reason, the equipment seems to rattle them out quicker than the on-road stuff.
The earlier series of these had a different style throttle cable on them. It had a big spring thing with a ball joint in it. And what would happen is that ball joint would seize up, and then that wouldn't turn, and it would flex your cable until it broke. And then this is the fix to change it, put this on, and change all kinds of stuff. Probably most of the tractors you'll find have been changed up to this style. Some of them still have that old thing on. I just was at one 2 days ago. And if you lube that ball up and keep that free, you'll save your throttle cable. Right, so in this side here, there's we can maybe help you out with some transmission trouble if you're possibly having. Maybe if it's missing a gear or two in your power shift, if it's only grabbing 1 or 2 of the 4 gears, or if it's locking up 2 gears at once. There's a good chance there's a solenoid here that's giving you grief. So in behind the battery box cover, you got your transmission control valve. So in here, behind all these wires, there's a couple solenoids. Yeah, there's one here. And there's one down underneath. And sometimes they've been known to go. Now, the original ones were a square black plastic on them, which I'll show you. I still got a couple on the back. If you're lucky, you will lose half your power shift. You'll lose, like, it'll only shift in 1 and 4 or 2 and 3 because it's either they're both off or one is on or the other is on or they're both on to get you 1, 2, 3, 4. If you're unlucky, one will kind of stick on kind of halfway in between and it'll shift 2 gears at once. And that's bad. That's a pull the transmission apart job.
Any symptoms of it happening, or does it just happen?
You'll all of a sudden the tractor, like if you're driving down the road, all of a sudden you'll hear it go under load. So yeah, push the pedal in as fast as you can and shift it into a different gear. But these solenoids are better. They don't seem to fail as often, these round ones. The black plastic ones, so if I had those old ones on here, I switched them out, and I'll show you at the back. And they also the same on the back. There's the same solenoids for forward and reverse. So if a tractor quits going forward, it's possible that the forward solenoid shot. If it quits going backwards, it's possible the reverse solenoid shot. They use the same solenoids for diff lock and MFD as well. So if your MFD is not coming off because they're spring on and they're hydraulic off, so that when you're parked, all 4 wheels are in park, it could be that as well. Here, this is a little sensor here for your bypassing the filter, which turns your light on in the cab. And if its filter's plugged, and sometimes this little ground wire kind of sneaks over there and sits against it like that, then the light will be on and you'll change the filter and it'll still be on. It's because that's how the sensor works. When it closes, it grounds that wire out. So if that ground is against it, your light will be stuck on all the time. So in here, this valve right back here, which controls forward, reverse, and it has your MFD and diff lock in it. Now the nice thing is, it's right on the casting which is which. So if you're MFD, you just look and you can find the MFD and that's one. So the only one I haven't changed yet is this one here. So you can still see it's got that square black box on it. That's the diff lock. If that one goes, it's not going to be the end of the world. I'm not going to be stuck with four-wheel drive not coming off, or not going forward, not going reverse.
That's the only solenoid you haven't changed.
That's the only one I haven't changed.
Square top plastic ones are prone to failure?
Yeah, they're more prone to failure. These ones, these round steel ones, we used to change those all the time, and then they started coming up with these, and then we had a lot less work. All right, so this is a bit of a poor engineering design if you ask me. These levers here control your remote. So these are the cables coming from the cabs, and then they pull and they operate. So you want to make sure you keep this well lubed in here, because they get rust in there, and what happens is there's some nylon bushings in there, and the rust gets behind them and actually causes them to pinch on the shaft. And then that whole shaft turns, and then when you go to operate number 2, then all 3 will want to go. And it's hard, you'll have both your handles all kind of locked together. And to fix that, you got to pull this off, get it all apart, and then when you do that, then you need to change all the O-rings between all these stacks, otherwise they're all gonna leak when you go back together. If you own one of these things, like every week, soak this stack here with oil.
I use this tractor to grade my driveway twice a year. Drop a bolt inside there.
Yeah, do not drop a bolt inside there.
How about a washer?
Underneath this cover is the linkage that hooks up to the sensor for the rock shaft. So you can see here I have a lock nut on there. I don't think from the factory that came with lock nuts. It just came with a nut, maybe a washer. Sometimes they will back off and fall, and well, they'll be on the bottom of your transmission. And that doesn't cause you too much grief to nut, but when this falls off, then the hitch doesn't work. And I don't remember the code. I think it's an H code that'll throw you. But it's because the computer doesn't know where the hitch is anymore, and it can't line it up with the one in the cab. So there's just 4 bolts. You pop this off and you go, oh, look, that's falling off. You stick it on there, you put a nut on, you bolt it back together, and away you go again. So between the engine and the transmission on these tractors is a short little drive shaft with 2 U-joints. So sometimes we have seen issues there when we really don't know what goes wrong because we've never seen them actually vibrating. We always got them in the shop once they were blown up. So if it starts to vibrate, stop and don't drive anywhere.
A vibrate as in like in the floorboards?
Yeah, you can feel it in the floorboards, and it'll be this strange vibration. Chances are something's going wrong in there. We've had guys shut it down, and the trucker goes to pick it up, and they go, oh, we'll just start it up and back it on the truck, and then it blows. Normally when it blows, it just cleans out that plastic shielding, but I've seen them clean out the bellow housing on the engine, and that gets to be expensive. So stop. Have a look in there, see what's going on.
You can move the plastic cover to see the U-joint?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can get the. It's a bit of a pain. You can work underneath, get the bolts out, get them around the other side, and you can sneak that out of there. And you can change that drive shaft without pulling the engine. You get to be a little bit of a monkey to do it, but it does work. Another joyous thing that can happen is underneath the hood here. There's a power stud right here underneath this little black guy, and sometimes these connections get loose. Now, Case had these on their MX tractors, their MXC tractors, and the CX tractors. They all have this situation like this. If it gets loose, you will have lots of cool electrical problems. Mine was loose on the 90C. Last year, I was driving home in a rainstorm at night from planting, and I turned the windshield wiper on, and everything died in the middle of the road. So luckily, I kind of had an idea what it was. I got out, I wiggled the wires, and was off to the races again. So yeah, just check on that, make sure it's tight. And if you're having these funny problems where you hit the key and all of a sudden it doesn't start and everything goes dead, chances are you have an issue there. All the Case Maxxums, doesn't matter if it's a 5000 series Maxxums or MX series Maxxum, they all have a shiftable PTO like this. Unless you have the European design, then it's built a little bit different. But in North America, they all look like this. So you get that snap ring out of there. And then you can turn it around to go to 1000. There's a hole on this end, and on this end, there's no hole. So the way it works is if you can see in down that tube, you see there's a little button in there, and that button is hooked to the sleeve that slides back and forth that shifts the gears. So that sleeve is pinned to a shift collar that looks like this, and that's what shifts between your 40 gear and your 1000 RPM gear. It's sprung into 1000 and you shove it back into 540. Now what can happen is when you have your PTO in there, into 540, is if your shaft that's hooked to your implement is seized in any way because it's got a twist in it, or it's just stuck, or it's too long and it doesn't collapse enough, or if you have like a bush hog and 3-point hitch and you raise it and you shove pressure on this PTO in, it'll break those pins off inside. And then this collar free floats and it'll get in between the gears and you have no PTO working. And to fix that, you get to take the back end of the tractor off. So don't put pressure on that PTO in or out. It will cause you grief. The way the PTO works, it's all done by a computer. So the computer wants to see an on signal or an off signal. So if you have the lever, you need to be on or off. It's not, oh, I want to engage the PTO slowly, so I better move the lever very slowly, because you get in between on and off, and then it confuses the computer, and then it throws a code, and the PTO doesn't work until you shut the tractor off, start it up again. So PTO, it's all modulated by the computer. You can't make it come on slow. It's going to do that on its own. On or off.
Just be rammy. Shove it in there.
Shove it in. Be rammy. These tractors were built for rammy Dutchmen. Right, these tractors, get underneath the hood's very simple. Pop the hood, front grills snap right off to get to the rad. Side panels just lift right off. The serviceability of the engine is very handy. The cabs are up high enough that you can get underneath them to work. And there is a plate underneath the floor panel. Take the floor mat out, there's a plate in there you can take out if you want to service that valve up there or change lines. Look at the bird mouse nest in the aspirator, oh my goodness.
So nice, the same engine in my track.
Sometimes it depends on what gear you're in, depends how hard it quits.
Oh, okay. Everybody always saying too that it squeaks, the belt squeaks. But it comes up on compression and comes back down again, right? Because it doesn't make it over center.
Oh.
It's like, yeah, it's a Cummins, it's normal, don't worry about it. What's that squeak? It's your belt, don't worry about it. All right, Kevin, thanks for showing us this. Guys, definitely comment down below if you enjoy these videos or not. I know it's a very specific market. Comment down below what your thoughts are on that. Yeah, we're making these videos to try and save you some money, so be nice in the comments. There we go.